Hello, I'd like to call this special meeting of the West South Milwaukee School Board to order. Suzette, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Burns,
Present.
Mr. Becker, Mrs. Kaiser,
Present.
Mr. Keller,
Here.
Ms. Deal,
Here.
Mrs. Carr.
Here.
Mr. Sikich is excused. However, he was going to try and join on Zoom. So I don't know if he was able to. Not at this time. Okay. He's excused. Mrs. Lee.
Here.
And President Lee.
Here. So for this meeting, we're going to move right into our public comment section. So as a reminder, you have 3 minutes to address the board. Please state your name and your address before beginning your comments. And if you would like to address the board, there is an electronic sign up that if you're watching via Zoom, you should have a link in the chat right now that you can sign up in. So the first person that I have, and I don't know if this person is in person or via Zoom, but is Tina Innocenti.
I did not
Via
see
Zoom?
somebody with that name on the Zoom.
Innocenti. I don't know if I pronounced the last name correctly.
Looks like she signed up the other day.
Oh, yeah.
Looks like she signed up on Friday, so I do
Right.
not see her on the list right now that's in the Zoom.
In case she is late, we'll move on to the next person. So if Tina does show up in the Zoom or in person here, we'll make sure she has an opportunity to speak. So next on the list is Kristen Hernandez.
Hi, thanks so much for listening to me. My name is Kristen Hernandez. I live at 740 South 110th Street. I am the parent to my son who is in Walker Elementary. He's in teen persistence there. So my comment today, I know that this is a special meeting, so I'll keep it brief just because it's more overarching. But before considering moving the Madison kids over to Walker Elementary, I just have some current concerns in regards to the current Walker infrastructure and how the board plans to address climate control in there, mainly AC. There are 41 students in my son's class, and I just don't see how they could add more. And keeping all the teachers too. I know I had worked the night that the Dr. Lexman was addressing questions for the Madison parents. And it was brought up that the teachers would travel with the students. And I'm just not sure how that would be possible. I understand at first, but ultimately I imagine that consolidations would have to take place just given the amount of students and then teacher ratio. So again, my main concern is just how the board plans to update the infrastructure before accommodating these children. My main concern is obviously air conditioning. There have been many times, especially with into September and October, as well as even April into May, where my son has like come out drenched in sweat because his classroom is just stifling. So that is my main concern. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Ms. Innocenti, I don't see yet. If you are in the Zoom, Tina Innocenti, please let us know. But I'm going to move on to the next person on the list, Ms. Sandy Lukic.
I'm on Zoom. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. So Sandy Lookage, 1227 South 102nd Street. So I'm here before you today as a taxpaying community member, an active participant in Madison's PTA, and most importantly, a mother. Sorry, this is an emotional thing. So I have sat through the presentation, attended the listening sessions, and have read all the research and recommendations. It is clear that closing to Madison has been the go-to from the start, and no amount of feedback from the community would sway that. But it is my role as a mother which brings me here today. We've been told throughout the process that emotions need to be kept out of it, And although I do agree that to an extent, at the elementary level, emotions play a big part of the students' lives. From the moment a child walks through the front doors of their school, they are taught to love their school, respect their school, have pride in their school, build relationships with their teachers and the students. In one vote for yes, you are asking hundreds of students to work together to better, hundreds of students to give up that small classroom sizes at Madison. You're asking them to abandon their love of their school. You're asking them to uproot their entire approach to education as they have known it. My eldest child is crushed by this news that his school may be closing, and I'm sure that many are too. He has concerns for class size. He has concerns for change. And just in general, he has concerns that everything that he has known up until this point will be gone. One of the most disappointing pieces of information which was shared during this process was that academics was not taken into consideration. This fact straight from Dr. Lexman's lips. Pershing Elementary is about the same size as Madison, but with a worse report card. Only about 37% of students are proficient in math and 32% testing and reading, whereas Madison is at 52% in math and 47% in reading. Why close a school which has ranked above average, a school which is providing a good education to our students? Additionally, we were told that Pershing was not considered because the district needs a presence in that community, and the goal is the least impact of families and students. Almost half the students who attend Pershing do not even live in that community. Approximately 90 resident students versus 132 resident students at Madison. Seems like a bigger impact to me. Lastly, as a community member, I was not thrilled to hear the proposed future plans for the Madison building. District offices, which make the end of the lease of the current building, makes the pulled forward timeline of the school closing seem extremely selfish, and the introduction of the tech school for expelled students. This is not the neighborhood landmark my family chose to live by. When we were told we have an obligation to these kids' education, why? They made the choice to do what they did to get expelled in an environment where multiple chances are given every day to do the right thing. Would you choose to live next to a known criminal with your family? I doubt it. If these are the future plans for the Madison building, I feel for the growth of the Rose Hill neighborhood and foresee the decline of residency and district enrollment to continue with much speed. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So at this time, that's the end of the list I have for those who have signed up for public comments. If there's anyone who is watching via Zoom who would like to sign up, I always give 30 seconds. I will reach in the list, or if Ms. Innocenti is there, obviously we would want to give an opportunity to hear from you as well.
See anyone with that name.
All right, and seeing no one else signing up for public comments, I will close public comments at this time. And we'll move on to our action items this evening, starting with item 4.1, Lane Intermediate School Consolidation. Ms. Ray? And team.
The information has been shared with the board previously, and I'm just going to read this one word for word off of the executive summary, given that we want to be sure that this is exactly as it has been proposed. So one of the goals of the West Allis West Milwaukee strategic plan is to develop and begin to implementation of a facilities master plan that includes strategies to create innovative learning spaces and maintain efficient building operation. During the development of the long-range facilities master plan, several things became apparent, including the need to right-size the number of schools to match our current and projected enrollment. Right-sizing was identified as one of our top priorities. The goal of right-sizing is to create efficiencies within our operations and finances and make recommendations regarding the following: how many schools and where they should be, and what facilities remain as is, and what facilities need renovation, replacement, or consolidation. To ensure that we had the most accurate data and current data made available to make an informed decision, we had the following reports created. And those are linked for people to yet again see, or they are on our website. Ray Architects helped us develop a long-range facilities master plan. CG Schmidt did an MEP study, which is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing analysis. MD Roffers worked with us to create a long-term enrollment projection. And all of those supports are on our website, and again, linked below. So the enrollment analysis shows that the sharpest decline in resident enrollment already occurred, and that enrollment is projected to remain consistent over the next 10 to 15 years. The goal was to identify the current facilities conditions and deficiencies, maximize efficiency and facility utilization across our district, physical capacity utilization, outline how our district addresses identified facility space needs in an efficient and cost-effective manner, and then the recommendations after working with the Facility Advisory Committee. The goal of that committee was to develop that long-range facilities plan by engaging our community, teachers, parents, students, and other stakeholders in a collaborative facility planning process, to present our findings and make recommendations to the West Allis West Milwaukee School District Board of Education regarding 2 questions. How can schools be renovated or replaced or consolidated in ways that inspire and shape learning for the future? And how can we do this in ways that are cost effective for our community? FACT team members discussed a number of options as they went through. These included available site for expansion, municipal considerations, the capital improvement costs relative to replacement costs, building investment, building assets, and the original building age. And the FACT made 3 recommendations to the Board of Education. The most relevant to school consolidation was to reduce the number of school facilities across our district, to align with current enrollment projections, to increase operational efficiencies, to reduce long-term administrative and maintenance costs, which included then operating 8 elementary schools, 2 intermediate schools, 1 comprehensive high school, and 1 smaller project-based learning high school. That then led to the School Consolidation Committee. With that recommendation from FACT, a School Consolidation Committee was created, and their goal was to determine which of those schools would be consolidated based on the FACT recommendations.
This meeting is being recorded.
So that group reviewed how potential consolidation.
Apologize. Prior just got the meeting.
Again? Yeah, okay. How potential consolidation would impact the neighborhood boundaries, and evaluated the redesign of the intermediate and elementary neighborhood boundaries to support school consolidation using the following priorities, not in any ranking order. Maintain solidarity among elementary to intermediate school students. Limit the number of families who would be uprooted from any given school at any time. The geographic location of the schools, which included the transportation costs and family considerations, the distance from home to school, and then each school's optimal enrollment versus maximum capacity. The best indicator, as noted, of how many students a school can have is how many they've ever had historically. We've committed to bus transportation being no longer than any current ride times. Class sizes will remain consistent with board approved policy. And then we'll work on programmatic and logistics, meaning the reduction on the need of traveling staff between sites and the increased class offerings. The cost savings analysis is that the consolidation will allow us to operate more efficiently and effectively, which estimated to save our district approximately $943,292 annually per secondary school consolidation. These estimated savings will come in the following areas: office and administration, operational support, and services and utilities. And I know the several board members that asked for there to be specifics based on which school is being considered. That gets to be very difficult because it depends on the salaries of the individuals that work at that school and some of those pieces, which should we get down that road, we can give more detail to the board as we go forward. The analysis of the 6th grade choice, which also became a question mark, is in the document as well. So we've had some questions from the board as well around, could we potentially give an option for 6th graders to immediately go to their new neighborhood location? And the analysis of that and why that is not part of the current recommendation is that assuming half the 6th grade students from Lane chose to attend Frank Lloyd Wright, that would be about 82 students from the total 6th grade projection of 163 students. That would require us to hire an additional 7 to 8 teachers, 4 general academics and 3 to 4 elective teachers, which would cost $600,000 to $675,000. Not to mention that then finding enough staff to double staff the 2 locations would be also a challenge. And then we'd be reducing a significant number of staff after that 1-year contract. This would also result in an additional 2 buses being added to the current budget, which would be about $100,000. And then since we share teachers for secondary schools, that would mean that the secondary schools, meaning Hale, Central, Lane, West Milwaukee, and Frank Lloyd Wright, would all need to redo their master schedules, which are currently now set to accommodate the addition, especially of the elective teachers, because the elective teachers are frequently shared between the intermediate schools and the high schools. So given the timing of the decision, it would not only be fiscally challenging to find an additional $775,000 in the budget, but it would also impact nearly all of our secondary schools, their teaching staff, and potentially their students. So with all of that background, the recommendation is that the administration recommends that the board approve the consolidation of Lane Intermediate School into Frank Lloyd Wright, beginning with the 23-24 school year, and approve the appropriate changes to the intermediate school neighborhood boundaries as presented. And in the packet in front of you, as well as up on the slides, just for reference and to refresh everyone's memory, this is what the current intermediate boundary map would look like. And this is what the new proposed intermediate boundary map would be. Questions?
Questions, anyone? So this would be the consolidation of Lane into FLW starting after next school year. The proposal would be not to move 6th grade. 6th grade would stay going to Lane for next year. And then everyone would transition after that year over to FLW.
Do we have ideas on what to do for the students that are going to transition into 6th grade and then are going to transition across, because transitions are one of the big impacting features for student achievement?
Definitely. Some of that includes, I already sent out some emails today to try to get a few things arranged. So starting to do some workshops between both schools. We've used Youth Frontiers in the past, and they do student-led workshops so that we would do those, transport the students back and forth and have all the 6th grade participate together that are going to then be at class together as we go forward. We are also currently having the administrative team and the student services team at Frank Lloyd Wright stay the same, although the number is reduced for next year. So that gives the administration and the student services team time to go to Lane more regularly so that they can start making those connections with the incoming 6th grade students. So a couple of those things are already planned. The transition part is challenging. There's no doubt about that. And as a parent, and we tried to look at this from every angle that we could, and as a, trying to be fiscally responsible in the process. And it just kind of is what it is for how the transition is going to have to happen. But yes, doing all of those pieces, starting to get some familiarity back and forth with teachers, starting to do some things jointly with clubs and activities and things like that is all in the works.
So kind of going on the same line, how are we going to address this? Because obviously we don't have it in here, but it's going to impact our kids that are now going to be going to West Milwaukee Intermediate. That's going to be a smaller number, obviously, than from Lane. So is that on the district's radar, and how we get those kids incorporated over there?
Yep. And again, some of as we have incoming students coming in, assuming that the board approves this evening, as we have incoming students coming in into 5th grade, we'll immediately start with those students going to their new neighborhood school boundary. So we'll start to clean up some of that as new students are enrolling in the course of this next year, but the same exact thing. That will have some transition opportunities. The numbers grow slower at West Milwaukee because when the full 6th grade transitions into Frank Lloyd Wright, we still have the current 5th graders, and there's enrollment numbers in your packet that you can look at. The current 5th graders actually will already be at Frank Lloyd Wright. They won't have yet transitioned to West. So the number at West, that optimal number that Aaron's been showing all the way through is for 25, 26 numbers. So in 24, 25, or excuse me, 23, 24 and 24, 25, we're going to slowly see the transition get to those optimal numbers at both school sites.
Yeah, if you, in your packet, this document here, the last page of this document is on the screen. And so if you see below the blue box saying the closure of lane, you can kind of see on the left here where my mouse is, it shows that 23, 24, 1041, 24, 25, 947, and then in 25, 26, 853. The major reason for that decline is because in 23, 24, right, you're looking at this. I gotta think about this again. Next year's fifth graders and the next year's sixth graders. Well, those two groups that'll be at Wright for those 2 years include students who were Jefferson families and east of 60th Street at Longfellow, who will no longer be going to Wright. So for those 2 years, you have a pocket of, it's a bubble essentially. And that essentially results in what you can see about, 100 and then about 75, 80 student decline. And you can see essentially as the enrollment at Wright declines, it increases at West.
Yeah. So those same transition opportunities, of course, will be available to students who are at West Milwaukee or Frank Lloyd Wright. That'll be a slower grow into the numbers at West Milwaukee. So that's where right now more of the focus is on the transition to Frank Lloyd Wright. And then we'll continue that as we go to West Milwaukee as well.
So I think you may have already just answered this question, but my brain is not clicking onto it. So the current, if the board votes to approve this proposal as is, some current FLW students will, that neighborhood would be actually going to West. But is the plan to move them to West or let them matriculate naturally through FLW and only new incoming students after as of the 23-24 school year would move to West? Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's the bubble.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So that we're not uprooting the students, right, out of Jefferson. It's really the fifth grade students from Jefferson is what creates the bubble.
Okay.
And then, so the following year, they will naturally start going to West Milwaukee, but we have this pocket of the students that are projected to start there in the fall that we're not going to pull out of there and send somewhere else because the school will still be open.
Right. So
Well-
current, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't know.
I was just gonna reiterate again to make sure that I got my brain. The current FLW students and FLW students that will be going there next year will continue all the way through FLW.
Correct.
Only new students as of the 23-24 school year will be under the new intermediate boundaries if we.
Correct.
Correct.
Yes. Then are we gonna offer families opportunities so that they don't have one kid at FLW? So if they have a incoming sixth grader, but then the boundaries change and they have younger kids, are we gonna offer that opportunity for like all of them to go to West Milwaukee or all, like how?
Yeah, so that's gonna fall under the interdistrict transfer process, and there's 3 rules under which we honor an interdistrict transfer, but that would be one of them. So if for some reason we have had a rule change, it's a legal reason
Okay.
that we have closed one school and made that opportunity. So a family could say, well, time out. I don't want to have, a 8th grader at Frank Lloyd Wright from Jefferson's neighborhood and then a 6th and a 7th grader at West. I'd rather have them all together. They would use the interdistrict transfer process.
Other questions?
Aaron, can you remind me again, the total enrollment numbers that the school, that Frank Lloyd Wright and West Milwaukee can hold?
Yeah, so optimally, Frank Lloyd Wright would range between, 9.25 to 950. And just for some reference, in 2012, Frank Lloyd Wright, 2012, 2013, Frank Lloyd Wright had 1,055 students. And in 2013-14, they had 1,057. And in 14-15, they had 1,045. It is doable. It is possible. They have done it. But I think we're aiming for optimal and the sweet spot moving forward across the next 20 years. So 900 to 925 is a good number. For West Milwaukee, 500 is a good number for them. And they certainly have had more. 2012, they had just over 550. So.
Going back to the transition question Brandon had,
Do we have any kind of a project plan? Is there some kind of an outline and we'll have measurables and we'll be able to see all those things and measure the success?
Not yet, but we will. I started working on that already, what that transition plan needs to be to kind of account for all of these things, and the board will get regular updates on how that's going. And then we are working to look at shifting around some support staff between our offices, between the business office and our leadership and learning team, so that we have somebody who's readily available to answer questions and kind of walk through some of the process to support that as well, to make sure we can do it well.
So it was known to me, just based off the numbers you mentioned, Aaron. So we're looking at 1,041 for 23-24 at FLW, which is, borderline maximum for what they've had. Would there be plans for extra support to be able to try to handle a school that hasn't been that big for some time, suddenly being that big, to be able to ensure that we don't have a lot of behavioral issues and things like that that are going to derail the education that we're trying to do? Because obviously the goal from this is to be able to right size our district and deal with lots of other things. But we don't want to derail the education of the students that we have in the process of doing that. So 1,041 is a lot. I know we have some flexibility possibly with open enrollment seats and things like that, but doing one of the plans.
So for the building, when the building was that size, they had a principal and an a principal and an assistant principal, a dean of students, and then an instructional coach. And since we've shifted those intermediate dean of students roles to be additional instructional coaching and behavioral coaching. So they will maintain that number for next year, even though they're slated to be at 750. So we'd likely be reducing a position in the administrative support. And then as they grow, that will still be the same number. The student services staff as well, they'll gain some additional social work support when they get to that larger number temporarily for the year. And we'll continue to evaluate whether or not we need to add a youth advisor or something else during that year for the 1-year term to make sure that they have the support that they need.
I also think too that, given that we have a year to plan, I think some of the work that Steve and I can work on throughout the year is meeting with the team, the administrative team to map out what that looks like. I mean, we'll know the number of students in 6th grade and 7th grade and 8th grade. So it's like the blueprint of the school, which classrooms are 6th grade, how many in the room, how does that work with behavior? Is it better to have a 6th grade wing? I mean, we can start to get into the details and plan that out. And I also think too, what's other thing to keep in mind too, is that the administration they have there hasn't had turnover really. So they're only 2 years removed from having 950 there at the school. So we're looking at 80, 90 more kids, which is a lot, but in terms of a building of that size, it's, a 9% increase, which is something that a lot of their systems they have in place or had in place should be able to manage nearly all of the issues that they would expect to see with that enrollment they had in previous years. So.
And just like we always do, if there's ever a building, we'll plan for it as best we can. And then if there's a building that has an unexpected change or a need of additional support, then we figure out what those supports are and we add that.
So there's one youth advisor at FLW currently?
Currently, they are not slated to have one for next year, but we would go back to reconsidering that in the year that they were that large.
Are there any special ed considerations that we need to also be keeping in mind as far as, again, the size? I don't know what the percentage of special ed or anything like that, but.
It'll be about the same as it was, when they were that size previously, until the services will be able to be offered without any concerns. Most of that is, they do house some programs for students with pretty extensive disabilities. And so it's space consideration, but that space is available with that size.
Other questions? Kristen?
Just on that note, we've had quite a few special ed resignations or retirements. And so my biggest concern is making sure our students are getting their hours and getting their legal documents, services truly covered. So would that be hiring additional special educators or?
It depends on the students and the caseloads and the actual minutes written into each IEP. So that's kind of how we staff, right?
Yeah.
Is by caseload numbers and then making sure that those minutes are available within those IEPs. So it depends. That's a hard one to answer.
That'll be part of the
Till I know the
transition process.
students.
Gotcha.
Yep. We move staff each year depending on, we have that bubble going from 7th to 8th grade. So we transition
Mhm.
quite a few of the positions from 7th to 8th grade because they go with the students when it's in the world of special education.
Other questions? No further questions. I would look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? And did Mr. Sikich come on? Sort of double check that before we.
Just checking. I do
No,
not see
he's
him.
not. So do you want to do a roll call vote for this? Yep, do a roll call for
Yes.
this.
Okay. Mrs. Lee. Mrs. Kaiser.
Yes.
Mr. Sikich is excused. Mr. Burns.
Yes.
Mrs. Carr. Yes. Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mr. Becker.
Yes.
Ms. Deal.
Yes.
President Lee.
Yes. All right, that passes. So let's move on to item 4.2, Longfell Elementary School Consolidation. Same wonderful team here.
So the facilities master plan information is the same, so I'm not going to read that one again. The enrollment analysis is the same. The fact team information is the same as the last discussion. The school consolidation committee information is the same as the last discussion. The difference on an elementary closure is that the cost savings, so consolidation will allow our district to operate more efficiently and effectively, which estimated our savings to our district to be approximately $481,863 annually per elementary school consolidation. And again, those are those average across all the schools numbers. Right now, the specifics of what those cost savings are actualized into will come as we start to do the process, and we'll share those updates with the board. And then the difference in the elementary school is the analysis of the optional 4K choice. So assuming that all of the 22, 23 4K students from Longfellow choose to attend their new neighborhood school, this would account for 30 students based on our projected enrollment. We would need to staff for one additional teacher that's outside of the current budget. Given that students from Longfellow Elementary live under 2 miles from Jefferson and Pershing, there would be no additional transportation costs. Given that there is little impact to the schools and our budget, the options seems that it would be reasonable for future families as well as manageable for us to accommodate to allow an option for the 4K students to attend the new neighborhood school. So they could either choose to attend Longfellow for the last year of its closure, or they could choose to attend, depending on where they live, either Pershing or Jefferson for the following school year. So the recommendation is that the administration recommends that the board approve the consolidation of Longfellow Elementary School into Jefferson Elementary School and Pershing Elementary School to begin with the 23-24 school year, and approve appropriate changes to the elementary school neighborhood school boundaries as presented, and approve the option for Longfellow 4K students to begin 22-23 school year in their current or their new neighborhood school. And then Erin, I don't know if you want to share the boundary maps, if anybody needs to see those one more time.
So this is the kind of the neighborhood or the current elementary neighborhoods with the black line being the new neighborhood boundary for intermediates. So you can kind of see the divide there. And then current elementaries, and then this is kind of the Longfellow map that we had spoken about earlier.
Questions?
One of the benefits of consolidating elementary, you had mentioned it was a benefit would be to not have traveling special teachers. How many elementary schools would we have to consolidate for that to take place?
For there to be no travel in the elementaries?
Right.
Erin, I
When
don't know
would
if you
that
know
take
one
place?
Off the top of your head.
I'd have to do some analysis. But I think by consolidating 2, you would likely bring it down from currently 7 teams total. Or we have 8 teams total, sorry. By consolidating 2, you would cut the traveling staff in half. You'd likely have to have one team still would travel, just with the size of 2 of our schools. It would be hard to have a full team with a school size of under 300.
So it's at about 300 per school when that gets a full team of art, music, and Phi Ed.
So essentially, you'd be looking at Franklin and Mitchell would be the only two left, which are right here. So traveling at least would be geographically, like, there'd be some proximity to the schools.
Can you just remind me the numbers of kids from Longfellow that would go to Jefferson and those who would go to Pershing, please?
Yeah, the numbers are a little difficult to know, given that the families where they live changes year to year. But generally, as of the analysis of today, it's about 50-50 in terms of the 60th Street divider. So we'd be looking at for the 23-24 school year, about 190 projected enrollment students at Longfellow. So it'd be about 95 down the middle, essentially, assuming that statistic holds true. So you'd be looking at, excuse me, Pershing at a projected enrollment of 171 for 23-24 by itself, with 95 students would put them at 266. Jefferson 23-24 enrollment projected, by itself is at 413, with the 95 students puts them at 508. And then just for historical, Jefferson in 16-17 was at 513, optimally 500. So it's a pretty good number for them. Pershing optimal 250 to 275 with a projected with the consolidation at 266. 13-14, they had 280. So certainly an enrollment that's feasible given what they've done and what they've had.
Other questions?
Deidre, can you talk about the PD plan between Longfellow and Jefferson again?
Yep.
What that looked for?
So we've been working on, the question around academics and how we're supporting teachers as we do sort of our school change process and bring teachers into our deeper learning work. The Jefferson team and the Longfellow teams are about at the same space. So they have a consistent coach from our Blue Dot team at both locations. They have participated in some of the same exact training with the same exact coach, and then we'll align those schools next year for anything where there's cross team things. Only challenge with the elementaries is that the staff will obviously split with the students. And so we'll do some of that with the Pershing team and then some of that with the Jefferson team, so that as teachers are trying to navigate which open positions might be a good fit to them, they get the opportunity to get to know the staff at both locations and the culture. Each school has its own little culture like a city. So to get to know the culture at that school and try to make the best decisions so that we do retain the teachers that we have right now at Longfellow that are amazing.
Other questions? Ready?
I have two questions. The first one is just as a reminder with this, if we vote to consolidate Longfellow here, what is the impact to the class sizes at our two schools that they're going into then? Will that greatly change them at all?
No impact to class size, similar to the intermediate. We staff the buildings at the same rate. We're not going to staff them any differently. It's just going to mean more staff coming with more students. So class size will not increase based on this.
And the second question I had was actually probably one I should have asked with Lane as well, but we're talking about keeping teachers and as our students transition. What are we doing for our support staff, and not necessarily just the aides, but the kitchen staff, the maintenance crews, the people that are working the day-to-day buildings and facilities? Like, is there a plan for them as well?
There's not a specific plan for each individual yet, right? But there will be opportunities across each of those employee groups, and they'll be given the same opportunities to choose or to align themselves to their new role as they see fit. Right now, we have a transition. Some of our part-time secretaries are taking some of the full-time openings that are at elementary schools. So we'll have some temporary staff filling in some of those roles already, so that when we do reduce those, we're not reducing a long-time employee for ourselves. We will see some reduction in the staff overall, but we're hoping with natural turnover and retirements and things like that, that we're able to maintain keeping some of those staff, because they are just as key to what happens in the school with our students. And sometimes essentially more so because they're the person the student connects with. But we did have a few retirements with our head custodians this year, and we anticipate a couple more coming. So we would hope that we'll be able to retain those staff and the secretarial staff and some of those other people by natural retention and offering those opportunities in the same regard the way we're doing for teachers.
Other questions? Joe?
Looking at the projected savings, I just wonder, I feel like I have a good idea because I've been in all the conversations about what the priorities would be with those savings. Is there a prioritized list of where those savings would be allocated?
I don't know, Erin, if you want to answer that, I mean, obviously you don't need a principal and a head custodian at a school, right? Those positions get eliminated in the course of it, but where else did the $481,000?
Yeah, so there's,
Oh,
did you mean
Yeah.
like where the
just-
money?
Oh, I apologize.
Once we got the 400.
Oh.
Where's it gonna go?
Where will it be
Do we have
allocated?
a
Yeah.
priority?
Oh, where the
Allocated.
saving, oh, I
Yeah.
apologize, Joe. I misunderstood the question. Not yet. No, the goal is to try to put as much as we humanly possibly can into teacher compensation. We know, even though we were able to do the 4.7% increase this year, which we're all very pleased with, that still doesn't take us all the way up to where we want to be for teacher compensation. So one priority with the savings for sure is to continue to find ways to compensate teachers and the rest of our support staff as well in a way that is far more commensurate with the districts around us.
Other questions? If no other questions, I would look for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second,
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? Right, need a roll call again, please, Suzette?
Yes. Mr. Becker,
yes.
Mr. Keller,
Yes.
Mrs. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Sikich is excused. Mr. Burns,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Ms. Deal,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
President Lee.
Yes. All right, that passes. Let's move on to item 4.3, Madison Elementary School Consolidation. Please, team, take it away.
And again, similar to the last one, the facilities master plan information is the exact same on this analysis. The enrollment analysis is the same. The facility advisory team, community team is the same. The school consolidation committee information is the same. And again, this is all posted if anybody wants to review it. The cost savings analysis is in line with what Longfellow Elementary was projected to save, which is that $481,863 annually. The analysis of the 4K choice is again, that assuming that all 22, 23, 4K students from Madison choose their new neighborhood school of Walker. This would account for 24 students based on our enrollment projections. We would need to staff one additional teacher that would be outside of the current budget. We would also need to provide one additional bus route to provide transportation for the students to attend there. Given that there is little impact to the schools and our budget, this option seems that it would be both reasonable for future families as well as manageable for us to accommodate. The total fiscal impact is estimated to be $125,000 to allow the 4K option for current Madison families coming into 4K next year to choose either to attend Madison or to choose to attend their new neighborhood school, which would be Walker. So the recommendation is that the administration recommends that the board approve the consolidation of Madison Elementary School into Walker Elementary School, beginning with the 23-24 school year, and approve the appropriate changes to the elementary school neighborhood school boundaries as presented, and approve the option for Madison 4K students to begin the 22-23 school year in their current or their new neighborhood school.
And just a point to make on the analysis for the expense piece. Part of the reason I thought it was reasonable beyond just the expense number is that the addition of a teacher is under extreme circumstances that have to happen. So that's if every student decided for 4K, we were not going to Madison and going to Walker, we would just shift the 4K staff number potentially at Madison over to Walker. If half went and half didn't, then you might be in a predicament where you might need to add someone. So it's like under extreme circumstances would that have to happen. And so it's very likely, given our average and our average classroom enrollments, which is well below 22 at both schools for next year, it's very possible that would have to happen. So that's the only thing we know would have to happen would be the bus. And so that's where I thought it might be possible. Plus, that bus route will be coming anyway the following year. So it would give us some time to, additional time to work out some logistics there too. So.
Chris?
Here's my concern is looking at our building data stuff, and I'm going here through here, circling the outliers and stuff like that. Madison doesn't match any of those major outliers. And I think when we were discussing looking at Wilson, there were more concerns than when we looked at Madison. I understand the concern with Madison having a pretty significant enrollment. I know the desire for small classes, being a classroom teacher myself, I would, I understand that. My concern is the community feels that we're closing the school to make it an administrative building. And we understand that we'd only be using a quarter of the size of the school for what we need. But it also has gotten out there that it's not above the board. You know what I mean? Like almost, I don't want to say ethically, but my concern is I feel like we're looking at the wrong school here. I'm just not sure how I feel about Madison being necessary for next year.
Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Not jumping on that. I have concerns about closing Madison in a year. And my concern is that you're asking families, my family's one of them, to close 2 schools in our area. I'm sorry, I'm gonna get emotional here because we are here for our families. That's our goal. And I just feel like when we had our meeting, our workshop, we discussed closing Madison in 2 years. And then we see, then suddenly now it's 1 year. I know it was brought up that we thought, well, Madison, Longfellow, which ones would be better? But you're talking about Lane, okay, middle school is a really tough time. So now you're gonna move all our 6th graders from Madison, or the outgoing 5th graders are gonna go to Madison. And then you're gonna ask some families to then deal with not only closing Madison, but closing Lane at the same time. I think that's incredibly unfair, whether it's 10 families affected, 20 families. It's a transition. It's gonna be hard. Madison's it's a family school. It's a community school. I live half a block from there. I can see it from here. I understand the need to close Madison. I just don't feel that we need to close it in a year. And I feel very strongly about that. I've talked to parents at Madison. It's not fair. It's not fair that you're gonna have to make 6th grade families and other families of the kids at Madison deal with 2 school closures in 1 year. I think that's incredibly unfair. And it's unfair to my family too. It is. So I would like the board to consider, if you're going to close Madison, that you do it in 2 years instead of doing, or for the 24, 25 year or whatever, 2 years from now.
So let's start. Do you want me to start answering a couple of the questions? Yep. So to answer Kristen's question, I'll turn that back over to Erin in the analysis of why Madison was selected over some of the other schools that could have been up for recommendation.
Yeah, so part of the here that you have in your packet was that when we looked at trying to, I guess, analyze how the neighborhood boundaries could be rewritten to try to support the priorities on the screen, but on your piece of paper and your packet, it really became very difficult to do to maintain these priorities without affecting families in neighborhoods such as Franklin, such as Wilson, such as Mitchell. It became very challenging to do. So yeah, I think your point's valid, but I think when we looked at doing it, it became nearly impossible without cutting apart 4 different schools, Wilson, Franklin, Mitchell, and then Irving, to try to make that happen. So that's where we kind of came back to Madison as the possibility.
And just the idea that we're closing it just for the sole purpose of the administrative offices needing to go somewhere. We do have to move. We know that. It's not fiscally responsible to continue renting. We currently rent the 5th and the 6th floors of this building. It's far more space than we actually need. But there has also been money that was put aside when the building was sold to be able to put an addition on to our former administration building, if that should be where the administrative offices are most appropriate. It certainly seems silly to spend money building when we would have space. And so, but there's nothing that says that we wouldn't move into parts of Longfellow. That would make some sense. It wouldn't make, we've talked about, do we split up in each administrative group, take offices in some buildings, because we do have quite a few buildings with quite a bit of space. So there was no intention to choose a school with the purpose of a place for us to land. Somebody asked the question, if Madison was closed, would that become the administrative offices? And the answer is possibly, right? Because we have all of this year and all of next year before our lease is up, and then we do have to move somewhere. And so, but the options on where that is are quite extensive at the present moment. We do have a school for our students who are still going to be members of our community who have made some inappropriate choices. That program cannot be located in a school where there are other students in attendance. So, but as far as the adults who work in this building, we really can go work anywhere that would be appropriate.
Can you remind me again of the numbers that Walker will have if they take on all of Madison and the building optimal?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't have the optimal number in front of me here, but I can get that quick. But so Walker, beginning in 23-24, will have a projection of 204 students. Madison, beginning in 23-24, will stay consistent at 174 kids. So Walker then would be at 378. And then Walker has, depending on what you classify as a classroom, but classrooms that could be classrooms, about 17 to 19. So that provides, in my opinion, an optimal around 375-ish, but 2012, 2013, Walker had 387. 2013-14, Walker had 414. 2015-16, Walker had 391. 2016-17, Walker 383. So for nearly 5 years, they operated at a higher enrollment as that. So, that's likely with all those classrooms being classrooms. So they wouldn't have to go back to that, but that's where things would be with enrollment. Yeah.
Right. And so during public comment studies, we had a parent bring up a really good point, additional students, it gets hot. I'm a 4th grade, 5th grade teacher. I get it this time of year. When we were talking about the referendum, we were going to put some good faith money in. Can we use any of that good faith money to put into infrastructure for Walker? For such a change?
It's, well, again, like Aaron said, there were 5 years where they ran at a higher enrollment than we're considering now. And at that time, we didn't choose to do that. The capital improvements team certainly can bring forward anything that we would like to do, but we'll get the similar request from several other schools as well, given their size. And that's certainly something that the board can choose to allocate funds towards or choose to take a recommendation from our administrative team. That certainly wouldn't be a promise as a part of what we could say we would do tonight, because it takes quite a bit of analysis on how feasible some of those moves are in order to do that. But certainly, of course, it's something that we can consider.
Is that committee work or is that a reach out with Noah, President Lee, and
So,
work
I
on
mean,
that?
I feel that after these sorts of decisions are made, that kind of helps identify which buildings that we would be looking to invest in, whether that is in the form of a new referendum that is put forward, whether that's a form of trying to take some of the funds that were going to be allocated from ESSER $3 towards a referendum that failed. Is it a combination of those things? I think that's definitely something can be discussed. It would definitely probably come through the finance committee initially, because there'd be, analysis of that. And because Ms. Raymer is absolutely right. Walker, every school building, in my opinion, that doesn't have air conditioning should have air conditioning.
And we agree.
And so to pick one over another just because of a consolidation, I don't know if that's exactly fair, because there's ones that have been operating at much higher levels for years and years that don't have air conditioning either. So I think that it's definitely something we should address. We can't include it in this sort of discussion, but we definitely, I think, in my eyes, that would be like kind of the next place that we would put our attention towards. if that makes sense.
I just want it out there.
Yep. And that was part of what the facilities analysis helped us with, is which buildings are accessible for it and which buildings would require actual like physical alteration of the building in order to add the systems that would be necessary. So that's part of the information that Steve and his team have now to take into consideration as they're planning the capital improvement budget. And then to answer Amy's question about why the recommendation to close at the end of next year, is that the feedback that we got from, again, consultants and other people who do this work, is that's an awful long time to leave it sitting out there, the closure over the course of 2 years. And then we have families who are actually going to go through that whole process once and then go through that whole process again a second time the following year. So that is where the recommendation went from doing it over 2 years to 1 year.
Brian, you had a question?
I guess, because that's my concern now too, is that a number of families are going to be impacted with 2 closings because they have students potentially going to both schools. And then, there's going to be that change and that transition. So I guess that's the thing I'm starting to struggle with is it better to, have them go through both transitions at once? Or is it better to spread that out over a couple years? And I guess then that even goes a step further. If for some reason the consensus does become that we don't want to do it all in the same year, is that something we even need to take action on today?
Well, one of the things just to note is that students who live in this area right here of Longfellow their school will be closing and they will not be permitted to go to Franklin Wright after. So these families who live here would be experiencing that same thing.
Actually, if you start, so you're saying, so if I have a 6th grader at Lane next year, they have to be moved to FLW. You have a 6th grader that's going in FLW that changes to West Milwaukee, you do not have to change schools. So it's a different situation.
Yeah, for families with 2 students, yes, at different
But you get a
grades, yeah.
choice though, because you can do the transfer. Like if you had 2 students that were,
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that like a family was planning to go to Longfellow and then planning to go to Wright, it would be a multiple, like both schools in their path would be closing.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, if you have 2 students in a household, one in 6th and one in 4th, then yeah, that'd be a different situation. Yeah, you're right. That is different.
The other thing I did want to note, because I know a lot of conversation has been had about, looking at the numbers and the CIP cost. And I keep going back to when looking at Madison, because I do agree something does need to be done. And I keep going back to the one number that really kind of stands out to me is the CIP cost per square footage. So I think this is where being a smaller building kind of is harmful. You have less of a student population, so that cost per square foot, and I guess ultimately per student, though we didn't break it down that way, is going to be more to get that school repaired into the standard that we would want it to be. So while the overall number looks smaller than some of our other buildings, when you break it down per square footage, it's actually one of the four highest per square feet for Madison. So
That's the challenge, Brian, is that
Yeah.
you try to do that in the best way possible, right? So if you're looking at it by number of students, then that number goes up significantly at the smaller buildings,
exactly.
right? And so there has to be one uniform way that you find a way to look at that data. And again, as a reminder, that is why the board had, we're looking at information about Wilson is purely as you look at the cost per square footage, they're up there.
Mhm.
The disruption to having Wilson, the only way the boundaries would work is if it's split to 4 to 5 different locations, and that impacts another 2 to 3 elementary schools. That's where, we went back to the drawing board to say, is that the most logical decision? So there's so many factors involved in this, and this is hard, no matter how we do this, right? This is a very challenging decision, and it does have an impact on our students and our staff and our families and all of you and all of us. And that part is hard. And I know people keep saying you have to take the emotion out of it, but it is emotional. It's where your children are going to go to school, and it's those decisions that's emotional. And those connections that families have made to one another. This is hard. At the end of the day, we know that we have to right size and we have to create dollars in the budget to work on teacher compensation and to take care of some of these CIP needs that are still there no matter what we do, right? So as we look at this, and you look down the list, the estimated CIP cost for Franklin, and that's not all coming out of next year's budget, that's over the next several years, is close to $9 million, and Hoover is close to $15 million. You know, that those dollars have to come from somewhere. So as hard as this is, you know, that's where the recommendation from FACT came from, to get to 8 elementary schools eventually, 2 intermediates, 1 comprehensive, and 1 small project-based learning high school. And, you know, it's just the reality of the situation that we're in today. And it is hard. There's no doubt about that. And you guys have personal connections to each one of these schools that make that even more challenging for you as school board members. But ultimately, that was the task that's part of our strategic plan, was to make a long-range fiscal stability plan, a long-range facilities master plan being part of that. And that's why we engaged the FACT committee that had representation from every single school. And where they started and where they ended at the end were drastically different places because of just the reality of the information that we have to consider. And if we want to be fiscally healthy for the long term, it means making some very hard decisions right now.
I would like to amend the action so it's for the 24-25 school year. So then families aren't dealing with 2 closures in 1 year. I don't know if that needs an action or not, but
Are you moving that?
I move to make the change. If we vote yes to close Madison, it would be 2 years out as opposed to end of next year.
Well, wouldn't our vote, if we voted no tonight to doing that, wouldn't that be then what we would revisit it again? We're not saying we wouldn't close Madison. Tonight, we're just voting that we will either close it at the end of the following school year.
Yeah, but voting now gives them the time to consider 1 year transition of 2 schools plus the school afterwards. That kind of all can get worked together.
So, yeah, I
It's
think
kicking the can- I know it's kicking the can down the road.
voting on Madison today is the right move for our district long term. And I think that it's easy to not make the decision, right? Because it's a hard decision. All these are hard decisions, even though we didn't have the same discussion on the other 2 schools. It's not something that any of us want to do, but we were put in the position as board members to try and look beyond ourselves and beyond what's right in front of us to what's going to be 30 years down the road, and hope that when I'm not sitting here on the board, the district's still doing well because of decisions that hopefully I was a part of making. And so I think that not voting on closing Madison tonight would be, in my personal opinion, an error. Because based on all the work that FAC has done, all the work that all the committees have done to analyze over all these different variables, second guessing that now at this juncture, I think is not the right move. If we want to amend when it's closed, that's up to the board to decide. But I do think that we need to make a decision about that closure.
Just to add on that, I agree with Noah. I've been on all these committees. I was on the FACT committee. I was on the school board committee. I'm not arguing that we shouldn't close Madison. Like I said, it's going to be a grieving process for my family. However, it's the right thing to do. It's one of our smaller schools. I mean, I love my school, and it's disappointing to have to say that, but we don't have the money, and we need to make decisions that are going to benefit it in the future. As I said, I just would ask that we would consider doing it 2 years out rather than 1 year out.
Yeah, and Amy, just to clarify one piece, right? We are fiscally very healthy right now, right? So it's not that we're doing this because we have to for the current cost
No.
savings. It's our long-term fiscal health. And then what the community told us when they said no to the referenda question, lots of the feedback was prove that you're fiscally sustainable for a long period of time. Because although there's been feats of excellence to get us in this fiscal shape that we're in right now. That's what we're planning towards, like Noah said. So it's not that we need the immediate cost savings. We need to fiscally plan to be financially as sound as we are today, 30 years from now. And the cost associated just with the capital improvements, given the age of the buildings that we have, is weighty.
There's a motion on the floor.
There is a motion. Yes.
There is a motion?
I move to change just the year we would do it, to move it to 24, 25 versus the end of next year. Needs a second. if
I'll
anyone-
second it.
Okay.
Can I just ask a clarifying question here? So then, are you going to change the 4K piece in the motion? So that students could choose their 4K, and you're gonna change that by a year to 23, 24, from 22, 23 to 23, 24?
Yeah, both would switch to the 24, 25 number, correct?
Well, the year before, then the incoming 4K class would have the option. So instead of next year, if we
Yeah.
push it by a year, instead of the 22, 23, be the 23, 24, incoming 4K would have a choice.
Okay, I'm gonna play devil's advocate. If for some reason we did push it up 2 years, why couldn't we do that now and next year? Start that transition earlier.
I'm not
If
saying
you
we can't.
Would you have enough 4K to sustain Madison?
I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, that part would be a challenge. And remember, it has a fiscal impact to be able to do that. And so sustaining that over 2 years would, that's why we didn't make some of the recommendations at Lane that we did,
Mhm.
right, for 6th grade. That was the deterrent, was the cost. And so if you double the cost of that, which is, again, like Aaron said, the outside dollar amount that potentially could cost. But assuming worst case scenario, that would be a significant financial investment to allow that for the 4K. And the board needs to
Yeah.
decide if they were okay with that or not. But that would be the other challenge to it.
The other piece too, just to keep in mind, is if you did that over 2 years and every family that was moving into 4K, then kindergarten opted to go to the new school, you'd be in a spot where Madison might not have enough teachers to cover duties, recess, bus, after school. There just wouldn't be enough people in the building. So that would be a challenge. I would recommend that if you moved it to 24, 25, that you shift everything to 24. 25.
So, so that's why I asked that question,
Yep.
because as I said before, when I brought it up, I'm kind of torn on what's better, doing it all at once or spreading it out over 2 years. And my fear with that is if we push it back another year, you have the 4Kers starting, we're then ultimately going to that school, knowing that they're going to have to transition in a couple of years.
We're gonna do it next year.
To me, that's, I don't know, to me, that's almost a bigger impact. I don't know.
So would vote no if we would not have done the amendment. I would have voted no for different reasons. When I look at the master plan, it says the master plan that includes strategies to create innovative learning spaces and maintain efficient building operation. And I think that we're focusing on building operation and efficiencies and the fiscal. And I am not sold on the innovative learning spaces yet. And so I feel that we need to wait, because we can take a look at Longfellow now and that consolidation, and Lane and that consolidation, and we can learn from it. We are not in dire straits financially where we have to close these schools. Long-term, we know we're going to do it, but I think we need to wait and we need to take it slowly, and we need to learn from the consolidations that we will be doing. We'll get a transition plan in place this coming school year for Longfellow and for Lane, so that they're comfortable and everybody's in a good spot. And then we'll sit back and say, how did this go? What have we learned? And then the following year we'll do Madison. And then, of course, another school, that's a whole nother, we can talk about that. But I would vote no. So, but I wanted you to know
Without the
why.
amendment.
So now with the amendment, I'm very comfortable with that. That we would then vote
Yep.
to close Madison in 2 years.
And then just to address some of the innovative learning spaces, right? That is some of what the referenda dollars were proposed to do, right? Because even just remember maintaining this CIP cost that you have on the chart, right? That is simply maintenance. That is not creating new learning spaces. That is not doing some of those things. So the school consolidation, ultimately, yes, that's what FACT was looking for, were those innovative learning spaces, but no part of that can happen, right? We can't remodel for some of those things and take care of the general maintenance out of the same budget. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. And that's the challenge that we would have. So although that is the recommendation from us as well, to continue to look at being able to renovate spaces within our current budget, even keeping a school open for an additional year, that fiscal impact is not a part of what we would be able to do with the current CIP budget and the other dollars that we have.
And I guess I'm thinking of those innovative learning spaces, not necessarily fiscally, like with dollars. I'm looking at a plan as to the delivery of the instruction and the flexible classrooms and the way that, Madison and Walker are very different. And I think that we need more time to look at what that might look like. So I just want to take it slowly. I do.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that people aren't under the impression that with the current budget, that renovating to make more innovation spaces is a possibility right now. We'd have to reprioritize quite a few things in order to add that as one of our main priorities. And so far, that has not been the direction we have gone.
So I'm not a Robert's Rule expert, but since there was a motion to make an amendment, shouldn't we be taking
Yeah.
action
I was
on
just gonna
that?
say, we're gonna call
So
a question.
this is the, as I always do, right? Motion second. Is there any further discussion? This is the further discussion. So once we're done having this further discussion, then we can.
That's fine. I don't know that we
Take a vote.
clarified that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm calling.
Oh.
So we always ask for further discussion, and so this is what I'm considering. So we have a motion and second on the floor. Once all discussion is concluded, then we can have a vote on that. So speaking of discussion, is there any further discussion on this matter?
If we put this out a year, the year, the annual savings, the average is $480,000, right? What does that money mean to our district if we close in where we were versus if we close a year later? Like having that in our budget, that $480,000, what does that do for us?
Well, I mean, I guess the first thing is that, it wouldn't be, it potentially might not be that we would receive an annual savings of 480 initially in year one. As I think Dr. Waxman's mentioned, Deidre too, like a lot of our administrative contracts are 2 years. So if like we didn't have retirements in all the places that worked, there'd be another year of trying to work through some of the logistics with that. But I mean, it depends on kind of the priorities we would set during the budget process, I think, for that part at least. Yeah.
And we're starting to, thankfully, again, we're fiscally very healthy enough to be projecting out 2 and 3 and 4 years out. And so we've been super careful with our ESSER dollars and the gear dollars and the other dollars we've gotten as COVID relief funds to not use them on reoccurring expenses. But naturally, in the next several years, right, there are some, what you call kind of a cliff in the budget where we're going to have to make some budget priorities. So the goal would be to start making sure that we can plan for the long term. The actual dollars of all of that are really hard to articulate right now, given the unknowns.
Right, but like, what does it mean to like having that? Is that going to allow us to keep one teacher, even if it's half that in the first year? Is that going to allow us to keep a teacher? Is that going to allow us to keep a program running?
Well,
Or is it like, hey, we don't really need that money, so we'll just let it slide. We'll keep the Madison open for another year, and that's going to do more for us academically or for transitionally or something else. Like, what's the value of closing as we had it proposed versus what the amendment is.
Yeah. And again, as we've talked about, one of the big priorities is being able to make sure that we're looking at teacher compensation. And so how much we'd be able to dedicate to that gets impacted by how many other expenses we have every single year. So that's a piece of it, right? I can't tell you for sure that 400,000 would be going directly to that. The extra 400,000 allows us to get ahead of some of the costs potentially that are in the buildings that we know for sure we are keeping, right? We have Frank Lloyd Wright that we're keeping, and we have CIP needs at Frank Lloyd Wright for sure. At West Milwaukee that we're keeping, it has CIP needs as well. So it could potentially, we do need to increase the dollars that we are currently allocated to CIP needs, given the needs that we have, right? So potentially those dollars go into those, and we could stave off some of those projects quicker, so that we're not hitting a massive expense that was unplanned for by doing some of those pieces. So that would be the big difference.
It would essentially decrease expenses, which would allow us to be able to fund more projects, maybe teacher compensation, whatever the priorities would be with the board in that, either, across all three schools, which you're looking at around $2 million a year annually after a period of time, right? So that would be, I don't know a good reference to that, but that would be like the entire 4.7% without adding anything to the budget currently. So it's a sizable amount of money, but I don't, to your point, Deidre.
Yeah, so it would depend on where we decided to prioritize the money, and the more dollars we can free up, the better we can long-term plan. Sorry, Joe, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that 4.7%, that was the number that I was trying to use. It was kind of just sort of a benchmark, like that was 300, correct? For the 4.7?
300
It was 300,000, was it not? I'm trying to recall the exact amount.
for the 4.7% across all employees. I think it was 2 million.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. I'd have to double check that. Was that right? 2 million, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
So if we vote yes on this amendment, it would. we
Change it to
close-
24, 25.
but if we vote no, then we'd be approving the,
original.
No.
no, just the amendment.
Yeah, if we vote no on the amendment, then it votes the amendment. If the majority votes no, then it votes the amendment down.
Okay.
The current item would still be on the table.
Okay.
If the amendment passes, then that's the amendment and it passes as is.
Okay.
That would be an action on the original one. Other questions? So I'm going to vote no on this. And the reason I'm giving is because I don't think that waiting is going to be the best for the long term of the district. That's my opinion. I just think that by having it out for 2 years, it's going to be 2 more painful years for Madison and their families versus making the decision, having a year, have the transition with everybody else. I think that by waiting, we may run into other issues that we don't foresee right now that will make the final closure decision or the final closure harder versus doing it now. So that's just me. So however the board votes is how the board votes, obviously, but I just want to make sure if I vote no on something, I want people to know why. And that's the reason why for me. I think it would be better for us long-term if we made these decisions and transitions at once and we're able to receive the savings sooner and reduce the costs sooner. And we have other things that we have to make sure to do. And so this is going to split, those decisions as well when you're trying to do transitions and then more transitions after the fact. So that's my piece on that. Any other discussion?
So Noah, can I just read
Sure.
what we believe to be the proposed amendment to make
Yes.
sure we're all on the same page?
Of course.
And so motion by Ms. Kaiser, second by Mr. Becker to approve the consolidation of Madison Elementary School into Walker Elementary School to begin with the 24-25 school year and to approve the appropriate changes to the elementary school neighborhood school boundaries as presented and approve the option for the Madison 4K students to begin the 23-24 school year in their current school or in their new neighborhood school.
That sound like the amendment?
So it was for Madison to attend starting next year? Or starting 23-24. Okay, got it.
Yes, and that, so if the amendment passes, there will be no change for next year. No decision point for 4K families for Madison. It would take effect the following year. That incoming 4K only, but again, be allowed that option. Yeah, right? That's the intent. All right, so any other discussion? All right, we can get a roll call vote, please.
Okay, yes. Mr. Burns,
No.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Sickich is excused. Ms. Deal,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
No, and I have to say it just because I looked at you and I feel for you. And I just wanted to explain to it that I say no. But just for the opposite, for how you said, because I put myself like in Amy's shoes. And for me, I'd have to rip off the Band-Aid and just go for broke and do it all at one time. Because my heart does go out to the families. My kids are older. So it kind of bypasses me, I just past that point. But my heart goes out to all the families who are gonna be affected directly by this. And I feel for you, and none of these decisions are easy. So anyone out there who makes comments on social media or otherwise, there's nothing about this that's easy. But I put myself in the shoes of these families who are affected. And I feel for everybody. And so when I think of people like Amy who have kids in both spots that could potentially have to move more than once, I guess I just look at it and go, if I'm gonna have to go through the pain and sorrow of having to do that, I'd just rather do it at one time. So that's why I say no.
Mr. Keller.
No.
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Mrs. Carr,
Yes.
and President Lee.
No. What's the vote?
Split 4-4.
So that fails. Tie
Yeah.
fails. All right, so that amendment failed. We still have before us the original proposal. So is there any further discussion about that? So it's the exact same thing, except we're looking at the 23-24 school year instead of the 24-25 school year.
Do you want me to read it one more time?
Sure.
The administration recommends that the board approve the consolidation of Madison Elementary School into Walker Elementary School to begin with the 23-24 school year and approve the appropriate changes to elementary school neighborhood school boundaries as presented and approve the option for Madison 4K students to begin the 22-23 school year in their current or their new neighborhood school.
Right.
Just really quick to provide some clarity, because I know I've kind of even been back and forth on my thoughts regarding Madison and what year it should close. I think ultimately what made me vote against the amendment was the fact, similar to what Rebecca said, I think I would want the Band-Aid ripped off at once. And my other concern is if we push it off a year, something that I alluded to before, we have another group of kids starting that school that are going to be, they're going to be starting that school knowing they're going to be transitioning. And to me, that's just something I prefer to avoid. So just wanted to mention that.
Anything else? All right, I would look for a motion on what we have in front of us here. The original proposal for Madison's closure.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion?
Just to make sure I'm understanding accurately, now that the amendment has failed, this motion, it would have to be introduced as a different item, correct? We couldn't just revisit it this next meeting, for instance. It would have to be in the future, correct? It'd have to be down the road a ways.
Which item? I'm sorry.
The one for, the one we're currently voting on.
If it does not pass.
Oh, right. If it didn't pass, if it was tied again, or if it was voted down by a majority, yeah, it would have to be a different meeting. It would basically mean that we're saying we're not taking action on closing Madison tonight. And it could be brought up at a different meeting, yes. But like I said, limbo is not a good thing to be in.
Right.
So, but yes, if it failed one way or the other, then it would be something that could be brought up at a different meeting in the future. And I would probably say it would be brought up at the next meeting.
So then we're going to be in limbo if we voted the same way. I mean, it's still going to be 4-4. So do you think that we ought to just talk
we
a little
have
bit
to-
more to see if maybe we could change someone's mind? Like all of the points that you made are very valid, that the ones that voted no to the amendment, they are very valid. And I'm wondering if there is anybody who hasn't had a change of heart, would like to talk about it, or Kristen, or no? Are you, I'm just asking because if we keep the discussion going, then we might be able to come to a decision tonight, is what I'm trying to get at.
It's gonna come down to when Suzette calls my name.
Okay.
I can see both sides.
I know, I can see both sides. And now I'm feeling like,
I mean, my personal perspective at this point is we vote, we see how it plays out, and then we revisit it how we need to.
Okay.
Hopefully with
okay,
the full board. I know Jeff's excused tonight, but sometimes, when you have even numbers, this is the possibility that could happen. But I think at this point, I think we have enough information and we've had enough discussion that I don't necessarily know that things are going to change if we continue going
Hashing
on
it
and
out.
on and
Right,
on.
okay,
And
okay.
that's just my thought and my perspective on it.
I'm fully confident our administrative team to be able to put together a plan to make these transitions as successful as possible. Nothing's going to be 100%. I know it's going to be painful for those that are involved. But I really have confidence in our administrative team that they'll, once the decision is made, once the Band-Aid is gone, whatever you want to say, they can start the wheels in motion to put those PDs in and the transition plans for our students, and ensuring that people know each other and we have friends and we have colleagues and teams working together. Who's going to move where? That all takes time. And if we're able to make that decision now, that gives them more time to get that done. And I really think that the waiting is just going to be more painful for the community in general. Just do it now. We have other decisions that we know that are going to for us, or for the board anyways, in a year or two at least. So it's something that I just think it's time that we make a decision. So. Any other discussion? We have a motion in a second. All right. Can you have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mrs. Carr.
No.
Ms. Deal.
I'm going to vote yes, and I just want everyone to know that I just really feel that this is the best thing that we need to do for our district.
Mrs. Kaiser.
Yes.
Mr. Burns.
Yes.
Mr. Becker.
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Yes.
Mr. Sickich is excused. Mr. Keller.
Yes.
President Lee.
Yes.
Passes.
Thank you, everyone. I know this is not an easy thing for any of us to deal with or work through. I hope that the community can see how difficult it is. These are decisions that no board wants to make. But we have to look ahead in what this district is going to be, not what this district is. So thank you, everyone, for doing this difficult work. Thank you for the FACT committee members and the team that put all this effort in to provide these recommendations to us. Administration, thank you for all the numbers and everything that you brought forward to us. This is something that without the information, we would not be able to make these decisions. As you can see, it's still really hard for us to do. So we do have one more action item that we have. So we'll move on to item 4.4. Future school consolidation considerations. Strengthening team.
So again, in reference to all of the materials that you guys have seen, the FAC committee's recommendations, which again, ultimately were to go down to 8 elementaries from 11, 2 intermediates from 3, 1 comprehensive from 2, and a small project-based learning high school that stays consistent. The board approved that as our long-range facilities plan. And although right now we are not in a position to be ready to consider a 3rd elementary school, the administration recommends that the board approve a plan to revisit and consider approval of plans for the consolidations of an additional elementary school and the consolidation of 2 comprehensive high schools into 1 no later than the end of next school year. So just to clarify, that just means the board will have another discussion, we'll do another workshop. There were additional information that board members had asked for before they considered a 3rd elementary school. We haven't yet, eventually by enrollment, it would be fiscally irresponsible to run 2 comprehensive high schools with what our long-term enrollment plans are, which again is very consistent with many districts across our area. So our board does need to consider at what point would we be consolidating into 1 comprehensive high school with or without additional referenda dollars. So those are 2 things that the board will see more plans and consideration for prior to the end of the 23-24 school year.
Questions on this?
It's basically a vote to continue the process that was set out to us by fact.
And a commitment to put a time limit on that. So it's not just sitting out there forever. The community understands and realizes that we're still considering a 3rd elementary school for consolidation. And we're still considering the consolidation of the 2 comprehensive high schools, which if enrollment stays where it's looking like trending will be happening one way or another here in the future. So we just want to make sure to have that commitment be an actual action item. So that's something before the board in the future to know that we have to put that on our calendars and making sure we're doing workshops and so forth and so on. And we can also bring that up through committee work as well. If there's specific questions, things like that we want to have as addressed as we move forward through that process, so just everyone's aware as we move forward. So any questions? And I look for a motion.
Motion. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? Do we want to do a roll call on this one? This is not as, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. All right, that's the last item we have on the agenda this evening. I look for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.